All right, we're doing a quick run through of the quiz review. So please let me know if you got questions about anything, and happy to go into more detail. So finding x-intercepts just means making each of the parentheses equal 0. -3 plus 3 is 0. 5 minus 5 is 0. On this one, I think it's easy to see that -5 plus 5 is 0, but not quite as easy to see what makes 2x minus 3 0. The answer is 1.5. And the reason is if you do 2x minus 3 equals 0, you add 3 to both sides, and then you divide by 2. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. I actually, though, prefer the answer 3 over 2 because you can see where the 2 and the 3 came from when you look at the original factored form. Imagine it said just x minus 3. Then your answer would be positive 3. But it didn't say just x minus 3. It said 2x minus 3. So you divide by 2. That way you can counteract the times 2. Same idea here. If it just said x plus 3, my answer would be -3. But there's a times 3. So to solve, I do the opposite of times, which is divided. For the other one, I have add 2 to cancel -2, divide by 5. If you really prefer simplifying your fractions, you can try those. Next, we're going to factor first and then find the x-intercepts. Factoring is finding the numbers that add to make the middle term and multiply to make the ending term. So I can see -7 times 5 is -35. -7 plus 5 is -2. So I know those are the numbers that work for that problem. My x-intercepts are whatever numbers make those parentheses equal 0. On part B, it's the same idea. I need numbers that multiply to make 33 and add to make -14. Should say 14x. So two numbers that multiply to make 33 are 11 times 3. If I make them both negative, then they add up to -14, and they still multiply to make 33. So I get my two solutions of x equals 11 and x equals 3. The last one here of this first type, two numbers that multiply to make 18. Could be 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6. I'm going to use 2 times 9 because if I make the 9 negative and the 2 positive, those will add up to make -7x. So here I get -2, and here I get +9. On this next set of problems, it's a little harder because there's an a value that's not equal to 1. On these problems, I suggest drawing our box, trying to figure it out that way. 5x squared and 3. Remember to think of the outside pieces that multiply, 5x times 1x. And then I somehow need to add to make 16. Well, the only way I can get 3 is 3 times 1. So the question I need to answer is, does the 3 go here and the 1 there? Well, let's try it. That would make 5x and 3x. Does that add to make 16? No. Excuse me. So let's switch it. Let's do 5x and 1, x and 3. And with this new box, you can see that it does work, because that adds up to make 16. So now we have our two factors, 5x plus 1, x plus 3, and we have our two solutions, our two x-intercepts, -1/5 and -3. Excuse me. Same idea here. 3x squared can be written as 3x times x. I could either do 8 times 1 or 4 times 2. If I put a 4 here and a 2 there, that gives me 12 and 2. And this 2 times 4 gives me 8. And this will work out if I make one of those pieces negative. If I make the 4 negative on the outside, that makes the 8 and the 12 negative on the inside because you're multiplying by negative 4. So now my two factors become 3x plus 2 and x minus 4, giving me my two solutions of negative 2/3 and positive 4. On the last one, you could do the same process, but you may notice that all three of those numbers are divisible by 6. So you can divide everything by 6. 6 divided by 6, 18 divided by 6, 12 divided by 6. And then you can just factor the inside piece, ignoring the 6 in the front, and realizing that this is just 2 plus 1, and this is just 2 times 1. So you have your two solutions of negative 2 and negative 1. Great. Moving right along. Converting to standard form means getting rid of the parentheses. So this says 3 times x minus 5 squared. Remember that x minus 5 squared means 2 copies of x minus 5, making x times x squared, x times negative 5, another x times negative 5, and negative 5 times negative 5. The 3 and the 2 are just being copied down. I haven't done anything with the 3 and the 2 yet. I'm just writing them down again. What goes inside the parentheses is x squared minus 10x plus 25, because negative 10 is negative 5 plus 5, and 25 is negative 5 times negative 5. To then convert to standard form, I multiply the 3 inside the parentheses, and I don't lose track of my 2 at the end. So I can combine my like terms to get my final answer in standard form, 3x squared minus 30x plus 77. Part B is really similar. Let's draw our box for x minus 4 and x plus 4. And then let's just make sure that we don't lose track of the negative 3/4 in front of it. X times x is x squared. X times negative 4, positive 4 times x, positive 4 times negative 4. I'm not losing track of that a value of negative 3/4, and I'm writing down x squared minus 16 here. I wrote down x squared minus 16 because 4x and negative 4x add up to make 0, so I don't need to write it down. Remember that standard form is my goal, and standard form means there's no parentheses. So I'm distributing negative 3/4 times x squared, negative 3/4 times negative 16. Two negatives make a positive. 3/4 of 16 is 12. And that's your standard form. Part 4, solving for x. First, I'll add 5 to both sides. Then I'll take the square root, and I'll get positive 5, or I'll get negative 5. If I check my answer, either one of those squares to make 25, because when you multiply 5 times itself, you get 25, or negative 5 times itself, you get 25. Both of those work because 25 minus 5 is 20. So there were two answers. Let's try x minus 5 squared equals 25. Here, I'm going to take the square root first, because that's on the outside of the parentheses. So I have two options: the positive square root of 25 or the negative square root of 25. To solve those problems, I subtract 5 from both sides. 5 minus 5 tells me that x equals 0 is a solution. Negative 5 minus 5 tells me that x equals negative 10 is a solution. Let's start with plugging in 0. If I plug in 0, I just have 5 squared equals 25. And that's true. So we know that 0 is a solution. If I plug in negative 10 plus 5 makes negative 5. And that also squares to make 25. So 0 plus 5 is 5, and square that, you get 25. Negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5. Square that, you also get 25. Both are solutions. Last problem, -5 first, just like you would if you were solving a linear equation. Divide by 5 second, and then it's just like the problem we solved. Square root to get your two answers of plus or -5. Subtract 5 to get 0. That's 5 minus 5, or -10. So last is the word problems. I'm going to do these very quickly because I'm almost out of time. DeAndre and Bree go down to the football field to practice kicking field goals, and they have this equation for their football. X is seconds after it's been kicked. Y is the height. We know it's going to go like this through the air, something like that. And in fact, I know that the vertex is at 2, 64, because that's the form the equation is written in. What value represents the beginning of time? Well, X is the number of seconds since the ball has been kicked, so the beginning is 0 seconds after it's been kicked. What value represents the ground? Well, Y represents the height above the ground. If you are on the ground, your height above the ground is 0. Next question. Mr. Maurer is curious about whether or not the football will go through the field goal. And the field goal is 10 feet high. 10 feet high is a Y value. So I need to get the equation that has a Y value of 10. That's this equation. This other equation over here makes X equals 10. That would be 10 seconds after the ball is kicked. Miss Moose is curious about how high the ball was at the beginning of the kick. That's a time. The beginning of the kick we just talked about was X equals 0. So I'm looking at the equation that has X equals 0. That's this one. Miss Maiden is curious about when the ball hits the ground. Well, we said the ball hits the ground is Y equals 0. So I want this equation because that has Y equals 0. Now it says solve for when the ball hits the ground. So I take this equation, subtract 64 first, divide by -16, take the square root of 4, and I get 2, or -2. Add 2, so I get X equals 4. Add 2, so I get X equals 0. So the ball started on the ground, and then it landed on the ground after 4 seconds. Last problem, we've got a band, and they have a profit equation. What two ticket prices would result in the band making no money at all? That would be what makes this part equal 0, or what makes this part equal 0. 250 divided by 5, which is 50. And I got that by just making 250 minus 5x equals 0. You can just add 5x to both sides, so 250 equals 5x, and then divide by 5. Those are the two values that would mean no money is made. The maximum is going to be halfway in between those values. So 50 plus 6 is 56. 56 divided by 2 is 28. That would make the profit maximized. And P of 28 is the maximum profit. So I just plug it in. Let's see what comes out. 28 minus 6. 250 minus 5 times 28. Right there. 2420 is the maximum profit. And that's how much money they could possibly make. Thanks for watching. Let me know if anything's confusing.